I turned 61 on a Wednesday. I didn't expect much, just a quiet evening, a warm meal, and maybe a shared laugh or two with the people I thought I could still call family. My only request had been dinner with my son, his wife, and a few close friends. Nothing fancy, just something simple to mark the fact that I was still standing another year older, another year carrying everything on my own since my husband passed. The restaurant was Ashley's choice. Trendy, loud, exposed brick walls, those buzzing Edison bulbs that tried too hard to be nostalgic. I would have picked something quieter, more familiar, but I didn't want to make waves. I smiled through the noise, nodded at the servers who called me boss, and took my seat at the long table they'd reserved under her name, not mine. Before I could even take a sip of water, Ashley shoved a glossy gift bag into my hands, tissue paper blooming out like a peacock's tail. I opened it, not out of excitement, but instinct. Inside was a baby onesie folded perfectly brand new. Across the chest, it read, "Best Grandma Ever." My breath caught in my throat. We thought it was time she chirped, eyes wide, smile tighter than her face could hold. Her nails were manicured in a soft pink one of those shades that looked innocent until it cut you. Right, Daniel. My son Daniel looked at me then. He smiled, not the crooked, boyish grin I raised him with. This smile was different, calm, measured, like it had been practiced, like he'd said it in the mirror 10 times before walking out the door. "Yeah," he said, "especially since we'll have more space soon." My fork paused midair. I blinked. More space. Ashley leaned closer, elbows on the table, like we were old girlfriends, not family. "We're just so grateful you agreed, Mary. Honestly, not every mom would be this generous." The table went still. The air thickened. I frowned, agreed to what I wanted to ask. But before the words could leave my mouth, Daniel stood up and clinked his wine glass with a spoon. "Can I have everyone's attention?" he announced, voice raised just enough to make the servers glance over. Tonight's not just about celebrating my incredible mom's birthday. It's also about new beginnings. Ashley had her phone out recording, framing the moment like it was a scene from a well-rehearsed play, a performance, a trap. "We're moving into Mom's apartment," Daniel declared. "It just makes sense. She doesn't need all that space anymore, and we're starting a family." Applause, laughter, toasts. Everyone clinked glasses, everyone except me. I sat there stunned, my fork now, limp in my hand. My son looked at me like it was a done deal, like I was supposed to smile and clap along. "Right, Mom," he said, his eyes drilling into mine, his smile painfully wide. In that moment, the pressure collapsed around me. I felt it lock into place like a mousetrap, and I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I panicked. My brain froze, my heart screamed, but my body moved like a puppet strung up by guilt, fear, and shock. I forced a smile, took a sip of wine that suddenly tasted like vinegar. I told myself to get through the meal to survive the evening. But nothing tasted right after that. Not the food, not the company, not even the laughter, which felt suddenly sharp and cold. Ashley began talking about nursery plans, paint colors, where the crib would go, which curtains she planned to rip down first. She laughed about old lady decor, promising I could still keep my plants on the balcony if I wanted. Daniel added casually, "We'll give you time to move." No pressure. But there was pressure. Immense, calculated, crushing pressure. Because this wasn't a request. This was a declaration dressed in sweetness, wrapped in manipulation, and served with a side of celebration. They hadn't asked. They had decided. They had claimed. And they did it on my birthday. My home, the place I'd built with my husband, cried in repaired after floods and broken things filled with memories. And mourning was now a line item on their life plan. A backdrop for a baby that didn't even exist yet. I excused myself halfway through dessert. My heels clicked against the sidewalk as I walked alone under the city lights, but inside, everything had gone dark. When I got home that night, something in the air had changed. Not just in my apartment, but inside me. The space no longer felt warm or familiar. It felt staged, like a house I was being quietly moved out of. I walked from room to room, running my fingers along the bookshelf my husband had built now, noticing how bare it felt, how temporary. My home, once sacred, now felt like a set piece in someone else's fantasy. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to play cards, drink coffee, talk about the news, where I once held my husband's hand as he told me he wasn't afraid to die. Now it held silence, weight, memory that no longer comforted but warned. I stared at the wood grain for what must have been an hour, unable to move, unable to speak, as if the weight of what had just happened had pressed down on me like a stone. Eventually, I found the strength to open a drawer I hadn't touched in months, the one where I kept all the paperwork my husband had meticulously organized before his passing. Wills, property deeds, emergency instructions, and there nestled in the middle was a copy of the power of attorney form signed during a hospital stay 2 years ago when I had pneumonia. I hadn't thought twice at the time. I was ill feverish, and Daniel had said it was just in case the insurance needed clarity. There it was, his name, Daniel Carter, appointed agent. I stared at it, my stomach turning. A chill ran up my spine as the pieces began to fall into place. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't hopeful. He was executing a plan that required my silence, my confusion, and my trust. I realized in that moment that I hadn't simply been caught off guard, I had been quietly and deliberately prepared for. At midnight, I texted my lawyer, just a single line. "Is this still valid?" She responded in the morning, her tone more urgent than I'd ever heard from her. "If you didn't revoke it, yes. We need to talk. Immediately." That was the moment everything snapped into focus. Daniel wasn't waiting for me to make a decision. He was moving forward like the decision had already been made. Because to him, it had. In his mind, I wasn't a person anymore. I was a pathway, a name on a deed, an obstacle to be cleared. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. I sat in my robe on the living room couch, lights off, mind racing. I kept seeing his face from that night at the restaurant, so calm, so composed, so eerily entitled. I remembered Ashley filming me, her phone angled just right to capture my forced nod and shaky smile. My silence, my compliance. I had unknowingly played a role in their performance. In the morning, it got worse. Ashley had posted a slow-motion video of my living room set to soft acoustic music. Her caption read, "Saying goodbye to Grandma's place and hello to our next chapter." I hadn't said yes, I hadn't signed a thing, but to the world, the decision had already been made. The comments poured in, so sweet of her to give it to them. She must be so proud. I scrolled until I couldn't breathe. Then came the email. From Daniel, a transition plan, a list of items they wanted moved out by the end of the month, suggested handover dates, a Pinterest board titled Neutral Nursery Aesthetic. I stared at photos of my bedroom, my sanctuary mocked up as a nursery with a crib, placed exactly where my late husband's armchair still sat. I hadn't answered a single question, but they'd already answered all of theirs. Later that day, I went to my lawyer's office. Pressed slacks, crisp blouse, a stack of folders under my arm like armor. She flipped through the documents with a furrowed brow and explained the real danger Daniel could use. The power of attorney, coupled with a doctor's statement, just one claiming I showed signs of memory, declined to contest my ability to make decisions. He could freeze my assets. He could tie me up in court. It had been rehearsed. It had been prepared. All it would take was a slip, a yes in a text, a confused answer over coffee, for him to claim I was incapable. That's when I understood the truth. They weren't waiting for permission. They were staging a takeover. Quietly, legally, emotionally. And I had two choices: stand there and let them build their story on my silence, or burn the script before the curtain ever rose again. It was the little things that confirmed what I didn't want to admit. The quiet betrayals, the smirks Ashley tried to hide when she walked through my apartment as if auditioning to replace me. The way Daniel stopped looking me in the eye, not out of guilt, but out of strategy, like he was already mentally erasing me from the picture. They had started speaking in the past tense. Mom agreed. She's letting us. She said we could. But I hadn't said a word. I'd nodded once in panic, under pressure on my birthday. That was not consent. That was a survival reflex. Yet they spun it into permission. It got worse the next time Ashley stopped by. She didn't text. She didn't knock. She simply showed up with a cup of iced coffee and a white gift bag. Her voice was coated in syrup when she said, "Hazelnut cream, extra ice, your favorite." I didn't smile. I didn't invite her in. She held out the gift bag like it was a peace offering. "Vitamins," she said. "Prenatals." My breath caught. She looked at me with those two wide eyes. "We're hoping." "But you already knew that." "You're pregnant?" I asked. She paused for a moment, then placed her hand on her stomach with theatrical gentleness. We weren't going to say anything, but after the dinner it just felt right. Like a sign. No test, no doctor, just a performance. I knew she wasn't pregnant. I didn't need proof. Her body language betrayed her. The alertness in her eyes, the nonchalance as she opened my fridge and downed a sparkling water without even checking the label. No woman in her first trimester would drink that much caffeine without a thought. It wasn't nesting. It was claiming territory. She strolled through the apartment like it already belonged to her, pointing at furniture, talking about what to repaint, where the crib would go. "We'll knock down this closet," she said, as if I wasn't even standing there. "It's too cramped." Then came the final straw. "This bookshelf," she said, running her manicured nails across the top. "We can donate it." "It's kind of outdated, right?" My husband built that bookshelf with his hands 31 years ago. He sanded every edge, stained it, to match our old floors, and placed the very first book, Leaves of Grass, on it the day we moved in. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I just followed her quietly as she opened drawers, peeked into closets, touched things that weren't hers. In my sewing room, she made one last comment. "We should turn this into the nursery. It's tucked away, but stairs might get hard for you soon." That's when something inside me broke, but not in the way they expected. Not a scream, not a sob, just a sudden clarity, sharp and cold, like ice cracking underfoot. "When did your doctor confirm the pregnancy?" I asked. She blinked. Fast. "It's early. Too early for all that. No ultrasound, no blood work, no confirmation, just a script, a story built on assumption and manipulation. Anyway," she added with a fake laugh, "you'll be the first to know." Later, she went to the bathroom. I didn't follow. I stayed silent and watched her purse sitting open on the kitchen counter. Inside, I saw a folder, a manila folder, the kind real estate agents use. I peeked. Floor plans, my floor plans, labeled with furniture placements, crib in the corner, neutral color palettes, and a Zillow estimate of the apartment's current value. They weren't planning to live here. They were staging it to flip, or worse, using it as leverage to secure a loan before I'd even handed over the keys. I took photos, every page, every note, then carefully slid the folder back into her bag. When she emerged smiling and scrolling on her phone, I asked if she wanted to stay for dinner. She looked surprised. Sure, that'd be so nice. "Should I call Daniel?" "No," I said. "Just us." I made frozen pasta and poured stale wine. She thought she was winning, but I had seen enough. Her fake sweetness, the fictional pregnancy, the paperwork in her purse, the way she sat on my couch already imagining herself the queen of a castle built on lies. That night after she left, I pushed my heavy sewing machine in front of the door and opened a new folder on my phone. I called it Proof, because this wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't family. This was fraud. And they had no idea I had just gone from a pawn in their story to the one writing the final chapter. Revenge wasn't what I wanted, not at first. What I wanted was clarity, a moment to breathe, a space to process the truth without someone knocking at my door or smiling with teeth too white to mean anything real. But as the lies piled up and the plans continued without me, something inside shifted. I realized I wasn't part of their future. I was the barrier they needed to eliminate. That's when I stopped grieving and started planning. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and opened every drawer, every file, every box that carried my name. I sorted through marriage licenses, property deeds, savings statements, tax returns, anything with weight, anything that could stand in court. I labeled everything scanned what I could and placed it all in a metal lockbox I stored under my bed. I called my lawyer and scheduled an emergency meeting. She didn't need much convincing. The moment I told her Daniel had sent a preliminary transfer agreement with my name already filled in, she said, "Bring everything. And don't sign anything. Not even a receipt." I arrived dressed like I was going to war. Collared shirt, shoes that clicked, hair tied back. I wanted to look like the kind of woman people don't question. She scanned the documents, her lips pressed into a line. They're trying to box you in. Build a narrative that says you're confused, incapable, or unstable. It's a common tactic when adult children want to seize control of property before a parent is gone. I sat frozen. My own son was laying the legal groundwork to erase me while I was still alive. We immediately revoked the power of attorney. I changed the passwords to my bank accounts, froze my credit, removed Daniel from every emergency contact form. Then I started journaling every day, every interaction. I created time-stamped notes in my own handwriting, even included fake grocery lists and mundane tasks just to document clarity. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being precise. Because this wasn't just about keeping my apartment. This was about preserving the truth before they rewrote it into something unrecognizable. Ashley came back 2 days later. No call, no warning. Just another visit with iced coffee and hollow eyes. She dropped casual comments about nesting and baby kicks like I'd forgotten the last conversation entirely. But this time, I didn't just smile and nod. I let her talk. I let her wonder. And while she did, I watched. I watched her open my cabinets. I watched her take notes in her phone. I watched her walk through my home like a thief scouting a job. And I stayed silent. Not weak, strategic. After she left, I called Iris. I hadn't spoken to Iris in years. She was a retired real estate agent who now lived 3 towns over and spent her mornings in the garden and her afternoons dodging calls from her ex-husband. I didn't even need to explain. The moment I told her what was happening, she said, "You need to disappear before they notice you've woken up." She had a private network. Quiet buyers, cash, buyers. No listings, no online footprints, no showings open to curious eyes. You'll get a little less for the place, she said, but it'll be clean, quiet, fast. They won't see it coming. I agreed without hesitation. That week, I played the part. I replied to Daniel's texts with brief kindness. I liked Ashley's new posts about baby names and neutral wall paint. I even posted a picture of my meatloaf captioned, "Nothing beats home cooking." They thought I was softening. They thought I was surrendering. They were wrong. Behind the scenes, I found a small cabin, 2 states away, a modest 2-bedroom with a cracked patio and outdated kitchen, nestled by a lake where no one knew me and no one owed them anything. The seller was a widower looking to downsize. He didn't care about haggling. I wired the payment the next day. While they were redecorating in their heads, I was packing in silence. Frank, a man from my church with a truck and a kind smile, helped me load the heirloom dishes, photo albums, and my husband's tools. No one asked questions. No one knew where I was going. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box in the new town, forwarded my mail to start 2 weeks later so they wouldn't notice the gap. I even told the building superintendent I was going away for health reasons and to release no information to anyone, not even family. Then I left a hint. One empty suitcase in the hallway, just visible enough for Ashley to see if she stopped by again. I knew she'd tell Daniel. They'd think they still had time. They didn't. Because while they were planning a takeover, I was planning an escape. And not the kind you make in fear, the kind you make in power. The silence became my strategy. In their eyes, I was the aging mother, docile, forgetful, sentimental. A woman too soft to resist, too lonely to push back. But, in the quiet, they mistook for weakness. I was building something stronger than rage. I was building distance, not just miles, but legal, emotional, permanent distance. I had sold the apartment, not listed it, not advertised it, sold it quietly off market through Iris and her network of trusted buyers who preferred anonymity. The offer came fast, full cash, no contingencies. The kind of sale that closes in 72 hours and leaves no trail for opportunists to follow. They didn't know, not yet. Ashley posted another video that morning, her sitting on my couch, barefoot, speaking softly about bringing warmth back into the space. The caption, "Soon to be ours, but forever Grandma's legacy." Her voice was sweet. The lies were thick. The performance was flawless. But I didn't cry. I didn't reply. I screenshotted it, filed it under my folder. Proof. Then I left a single deliberate clue, an empty suitcase in the hallway, visible but subtle. Just enough to plant a seed in her mind. She'd think I was going on a short trip, that they still had time. They didn't. I was 3 steps ahead, and still moving. While they drafted Pinterest boards and shared nursery updates, I signed closing papers. I coordinated the transfer with the title company. I filed a change of address, changed emergency contacts, and moved all remaining valuables out of the apartment. I played the character they cast me as. I smiled in text messages. I liked their posts. I even complimented Ashley's fake baby bump in a comment. Let them think I was weak. Let them believe they'd won. Because by the time they found out, it would be far too late. The knock came 3 days later. It wasn't friendly. It was sharp, cold, the kind of knock you feel in your spine. I didn't answer. I stood behind the door listening. Then came Daniel's voice. Mom opened the door. Silence. The key jiggled in the lock. I smiled to myself. I had changed it 2 days prior. The lock resisted. He tried again. Another knock louder this time. We need to talk. I stayed still, back against the hallway wall, calm, listening to the panic seep into his tone. We found out about the realtor, he said, quieter now. Iris called someone we know. You're selling the place. He sounded stunned, like a magician whose trick had backfired. You're sabotaging your own family. No, Daniel. I was protecting myself from mine. An envelope slid under the door. Another legal document this time, a request for transitional occupancy review. A highlighted line mentioned a potential medical guardianship claim. They weren't slowing down. They were escalating. I called my lawyer immediately. She read it aloud, sighed, and said what I already knew. They're not just pushing anymore. They're preparing to challenge your competency. That night, I didn't sleep. I documented everything. I filmed myself summarizing financial transactions. I explained on camera each choice I had made, when, how, and why. I read from legal papers. I showed account statements. I time-stamped everything. I wasn't just protecting my property. I was protecting my mind. Because the moment someone calls you forgetful, people stop listening to what you remember. The next day, Ashley returned alone this time, but with a camera in hand. She stood in the hallway, screaming loud enough for the neighbors to peek through their blinds. "You're shutting out your grandchild? Is that what you want?" She was filming her own victim story, starring me as the villain. I opened the door just enough to be seen on camera and said a single word. "Leave." Her video caught it. Her tears. My calm. That night, it hit 4,000 likes. The caption read, "Pregnant and homeless, betrayed by family." I sent it to my lawyer. Every screenshot, every message, every frame. Then came Daniel's final attempt, sign the deed. We'll forget all this ever happened. Attached was the deed transfer. Ashley had signed. Daniel had signed. My name was blank. I didn't open it. I forwarded it directly to my attorney. Then I texted Daniel, "You'll be served within the week. Do not contact me again." Then I turned off my phone. By the time the sale finalized, the apartment no longer belonged to me or to them. It belonged to a young couple. Quiet, normal, no nursery plans, no manipulation, just people looking for a home. They kept the bookshelf my husband built. They placed plants on it. That's how I knew the ending was finally mine. The silence that followed the sale wasn't empty. It was earned. It was the kind of silence you feel in your bones after a storm has passed the calm, not because there's nothing left to say, but because you've already said it all in action. There were no more text messages to answer, no more legal games to play, no more pretending. The apartment was sold, legally, irrevocably. Every dollar had landed safely in my new account. Every document was notarized, filed, and protected. Every trace of Daniel and Ashley's name had been scrubbed from any place it didn't belong. But closure isn't just a contract. Closure is what happens when you finally stop flinching at the sound of your own doorbell. When you don't hold your breath walking past the room where your trust was broken. When you realize that no matter what they post online, no matter what they whisper to others, you don't owe them a single correction. Because the truth stands on its own. I sat across from my lawyer Annette in her office on a Thursday morning. Gray skies, black coffee, and a folder that felt heavier than it looked. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. Inside the folder were the final papers, a revised will, a transfer of my savings into a protected community trust, a clause that legally barred Daniel and Ashley from contesting any part of my estate. Not just cut out, but sealed out. No loopholes, no fallback clauses, no second chances. Annette slid the documents toward me, her voice calm but resolute. "It's done. If they challenge this, they'll lose. The paper trail is unbreakable." I signed. Not out of anger, not even revenge, but self-respect. For the woman I'd been, for the years I'd sacrificed, for the silence I endured. It was time they learned silence isn't surrender. 2 days later, Melissa, my niece, the only one who saw through Ashley's performance, called me. "I think Daniel knows," she said. "He's been posting passive-aggressive quotes again. Betrayal always comes from those closest to you. Type of stuff." I laughed. Genuinely laughed for the first time in weeks. "Let them quote," I said. "They lost the right to my name when they tried to steal it." Melissa sent me a photo of her newborn daughter with a handwritten note that read, "If she grows up to be half as strong as you, I'll have done something right." I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower and let the tears come quiet ones. Not the bitter kind, but the cleansing kind. The kind that means something ended and something better is beginning. That week, I received a letter from the charity board confirming that the Quiet Exit Fund, the one I had established in my husband's name, was now live. Every cent I didn't need went into that trust, my savings, my life insurance policy, my cabin. It was all dedicated to helping older women escape emotional and financial abuse from their own families. Women like me. Women who were told they were being selfish when they asked for boundaries. Women who were gaslit, guilt-tripped, and used until nothing was left. It wasn't just charity. It was justice. Later that evening, I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and stepped out onto the back porch of the cabin. The wind moved gently through the pine trees, and the lake glistened beneath the setting sun. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I didn't answer. I didn't even look. I turned it off and slid it into a drawer where it could no longer interrupt the life I had rebuilt. That weekend, Daniel sent one last message. Short, bitter, final, you win, hope it was worth losing your family. I didn't reply. I simply took a screenshot and added it to the folder marked proof, then deleted his number for good. The following morning, I had coffee with my new neighbor, Claire, a woman who left a 40-year marriage and now ran a soap business out of her garage. She told me, people get bold when money's involved, but you didn't give them what they wanted. That makes you dangerous now. I smiled. Dangerous felt strange, but right, because I hadn't just saved myself. I had carved out a path for others. I had rewritten the ending they tried to write for me, and I did it without screaming, without begging, without warning. No vengeance, just a clean exit, a closed door, and the kind of peace no one could inherit. 6 months later, I stood barefoot on the back porch of my cabin, hands wrapped around a warm mug of mint tea. The morning air was cool and clean. A line of birds sliced across the lake like a threat, sowing sky to water. I watched them without urgency, without distraction, just fully there in the stillness I used to fear. I hadn't heard from Daniel or Ashley in over 2 months. Not since the final legal notice had gone through, barring them from contacting me about anything inheritance-related ever again. No more voicemails, no more guilt trips in disguise, no more staged videos, just silence. And for the first time in years, that silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like safety, like a lock turning in the right direction. They didn't contest the will. They didn't come looking for one last confrontation. I think, in their own twisted way, they understood I was gone. Not just physically, not just legally, but emotionally. The version of me that bent, that yielded, that smiled through the betrayal that woman had packed her bags and left the stage. What remained was someone they couldn't manipulate, someone who had no weak spot they could press, someone who had discovered peace wasn't something handed to you. It's something you build brick by silent brick until the noise can't get in anymore. My days looked different now. Not dramatic, not grand, just mine. Mornings were spent in the garden, tending to thyme mint and the rosemary bush that refused to die. I liked that about it, its quiet resilience. Afternoons, I volunteered at the local community center, helping other women with paperwork, with housing applications, with phone calls they were too scared to make alone. Some came in shaking. Some came in silent. But all of them in some way reminded me of the woman I used to be afraid to call it abuse, because it didn't leave bruises. Evenings were slower, softer. I learned how to play chess from Claire, my neighbor, the one who started her life over at 65 and swore I had a killer instinct buried under all that politeness. We sat on her porch and talked about nothing in particular. We drank herbal tea, and sometimes she brought slices of lemon pie she swore were homemade, but always tasted like store-bought rebellion. The cabin was no longer just a place I escaped to. It had become a sanctuary. A place where I didn't have to explain myself. A space where every corner was untouched by anyone else's agenda. I cooked again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I laughed out loud. I slept through the night without clutching my phone like a weapon. On the day before my birthday, a letter arrived from Melissa. Inside was a photo of her newborn daughter and a note that read, "If she grows up to be half as strong as you, I'll have done something right." I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. And for the first time, I cried, not because I was broken, but because I had finally let go of everything that had tried to convince me I was. That evening, I wrote a check to a shelter that helps older women escape financial abuse and control. I signed it and sealed the envelope with 3 simple words: use it well. As the sun dipped behind the pine trees and the wind moved gently through the wind chimes hanging off an old rusty hook, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look. I reached over, powered it off, and slid it into the drawer where things I no longer need go to rest. Because this life, the one I built, in silence, in strategy, in fierce love for myself, was no longer up for negotiation. No more performances. No more applause for pain. No more clinging to people who only show up when there's something to take. I didn't give them a dramatic ending. I gave them a locked door, a rewritten will, and the softest, most powerful revenge of all, a life that was mine again. And this silence, it wasn't emptiness, it was peace, permanent, whole, exactly the kind they were never going to touch again. Not every betrayal comes with shouting matches or slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives with a smile, a soft voice, a camera filming your forced nod as someone claims your life decisions before you've even made them. That's the quiet kind, the kind that steals from you while pretending to love you, and it's the hardest kind to recognize. But here's the truth. This story reminds us of just because someone calls you family doesn't mean they have your best interest at heart. Love is not proven through bloodlines, but through respect, boundaries, and consent. The moment someone assumes your silence is agreement, your kindness is weakness, or your presence is theirs to control, that's not love. That's control wrapped in sentimentality. And when that happens, you don't have to scream to take your power back. You just have to move in silence, document, plan, reclaim. Because the most powerful form of revenge isn't revenge at all. It's freedom. It's selling the house they tried to steal. It's cutting them out of a will they thought they were owed. It's planting herbs in your own garden, answering to no one, and living a life so full of peace that it terrifies the ones who tried to write your ending for you. This story teaches us that setting boundaries is not betrayal, it's survival. That you don't owe anyone access to your life simply because you share a last name. That a calm, strategic exit will always speak louder than rage-filled arguments. It reminds us to prepare, legally, protect ourselves emotionally, and above all, to never confuse manipulation with care. If you're ever made to feel like you're being ungrateful for wanting respect or cruel for asking to be left in peace, remember people who benefit from your silence will always call your strength selfish. Let them talk. You don't owe anyone a performance. You owe yourself the right to a life that's truly yours.